welcome to the Teaching Corner. Today I wanted to talk about public school testing versus private testing in the United States of America. I recognize that some of my viewers are watching from other places, and so this won't apply to you, but if you live here in the US, any school-age child, actually 3 years old and up, if they're in school age, is eligible to get public school testing for special education. And this is done by the school system. It is free to you, and the reason that this is done is to see whether or not a student meets eligibility requirements for special education. Now, there are 14 categories that a student could fall into as far as meeting eligibility requirements. And those are autism, deafblindness, deafness, developmental delay, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impaired, which would include like ADHD, specific learning disability, speech language impairment, traumatic brain injury, or visual impairment, including blindness. So when it says meeting eligibility requirements, in order to meet the requirements for special education in the public school setting, their disability has to adversely affect their education. So for instance, say you have a student who has a really high IQ, but they're getting C's and D's in class, or something of that nature. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're failing, but it has to be negatively affecting their education. You could have a child with a disability, say a child who is deaf, and they're making straight A's. It is not negatively impacting their education, and all they need is some accommodations. That would mean that child falls under 504. And I did a video on the difference between an IEP and a 504 plan, which I'll put down below. But basically, that child might just need accommodations like preferential seating or a note taker in class or something like that. So any child in the public or private that you think is having a disability that is school age is eligible to get a test done by the public schools. And the difference is, in the past, when I first became a teacher, they would put a diagnosis on there, and some states have now gone to where they will no longer diagnose. And sometimes you need that diagnosis in order for you to receive services like private services, for insurance to cover certain things, or once your child ages out of the school system, you may need that diagnosis in order to get services into adulthood. You also need the diagnosis in order to get College Board, in order for them to be eligible for certain things for College Board. So private testing is done by a psychologist in their private practice. Certain ones will specialize, like I know the Autism Center specializes in children with autism. But the difference here between the public school setting that's trying to find eligibility is they are diagnostic. So what that means is they're running as many tests as they need to give your child a diagnosis. And so at the end of their testing, they will put what the child is diagnosed with. That includes an insurance code, and this can be used for if you go to get therapy, or something like if they need accommodations, if you need something for insurance, you have that insurance code. It also, because you're not meeting requirements for eligibility, but they're trying to diagnose, means that they may continue testing beyond what was initially stated if some of the testing comes back inconclusive. For example, I had a friend whose son went to get testing, and there was one test that wasn't very clear as to whether it was this or this, so they asked him to come back for further testing so that they could figure it out exactly what was going on. So even if you have a child in the public school setting, if they don't fall eligible for special education services, that doesn't necessarily mean that your child does not have a disability. So in that case, if your child was not eligible, but in your gut you felt like something was wrong, you might want to go get private testing so that your child can receive a diagnosis, and then you could go get private therapy for them if you needed to. Or let's say that you're in a private school setting or a homeschool setting, and you don't want the public school testing done, you want to go get it privately done, then that's an option for you. Do realize that getting it privately done means that you have to pay for it out of pocket because it's not covered by the school system, so it's no longer free. But check with your insurance company. I know when we first had an evaluation done, our insurance company did not cover any of the evaluation, so it was 100% out of our pocket. But when we've gone back for a reevaluation, the new insurance that we're currently on did cover the testing, except for it didn't cover a copay when we walked into the office. So I just had to pay a copay. If you really want private testing done but can't afford it, do know that some teaching universities offer that through their psychology program, where they will have students who are, already have their master's and are working on their doctorate, and they will test your student under they're being watched via camera by a psychologist who will sign off and say, yes, this is what's going on, but they will do the testing. The only thing I will say about that, because we have gone that route in the past, is that just recognize it may take a while because they're in classes, and so you have to wait until there's an opening and an availability, and then they do the testing, and then they have to write all their reports and get back to you. So that can be a lengthier process, but it's a much less expensive process if you're having to pay for it out of pocket. So I hope that was helpful. If it was, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye!